complicated? Well, there's going to be three things that I want to speak about. First of all, the history, the obligations, and spiritual benefits of wearing the scapular. Let's talk about the history. We know that throughout the history of the church, the most religious people were always seen, and especially in the Middle Ages, were the priests and the nuns. They were considered to be the ones that were following Christ more faithfully. And the lay Catholics, lay Christians, wanted to find some way that they could emulate the religious communities of the Middle Ages. So what they started to do was they started to practice some of the practices of the monks. For example, the history of the Rosary. The 150 Hail Marys that the people would say were in correspondence with the monks when they would pray the office, the 150 Psalms. There was the correlation that the lay Christian, though illiterate, could also participate in some of the spiritual benefits of the church. St. Simon Stock, who is the founder, or the one that Our Lady revealed himself to, is the one that really gives us the bronze scapular. And initially, when he received the scapular, it wasn't what we're familiar with, this thing that goes around our neck, this small little square rectangular piece of cloth. But in reality, it was part of the religious monk's habit. So if you've seen religious monks or brothers, sisters or brothers, monks, Dominicans, they have this habit, and then they have this outer cloth that goes on top of it. That's the original scapular. All right. Now, most of us do not wear that. All right. No, most of us would not wear a religious habit. We would not have the scapular on top of us. So the lay Christians wanted to find something that they could wear to identify themselves with the religious community. What they discovered, or what they started to do, is to make what we now know as the scapular, the small cloth that could be worn in the inside. But again, it still gave them the responsibility of not only belonging to the religious community, but also the obligations. On page 5 of our worksheet, the obligations of a Christian are very specific. We have the spiritual and the corporal works of mercy. If you're not familiar with the spiritual or corporal works of mercy, I would strongly suggest that you read them. Because to be enrolled in the confraternity of the bronze scapular means that we are going to practice these things. Now, this does not mean that if we don't enroll ourselves, we are excluded from these practices. All Christians are supposed to do this. But again, because of our desire to follow Christ more faithfully, we need to recognize the importance of following the spiritual and the corporal works of mercy. So for this, we are calling ourselves to be mindful of what Christ calls us to do each and every day. But specifically, because we wear the scapular, it's a responsibility for us. The reality for us today is this. What are the spiritual benefits of wearing the scapular? Well, there's a few of them. The one that's most obvious and most plain to most people is this. The promise of the scapular is that if I wear the scapular when I die, I will not suffer eternal fires of hell. Okay? Now, what we need to remember is that this is a promise that was given to us by Our Lady. On Divine Mercy Sunday, every year, 9 days before the feast, I get about 150 questions. Not about how I can practice and be more merciful, not what are the revelations of Sister Faustina, but the most question I get is, Father, how can I get that indulgence so I don't go to hell? All right? The reality is that we cannot just simply wear the scapular because it's going to be the preservation from me from dying in hell. It's a responsibility for us to say that it's a promise that we are calling ourselves to live as Christians. The piece of cloth cannot save us, but it's the reality of how we're calling to live our lives as Christians each and every day. We're calling ourselves to live, and it's a daily reminder for us. If you're wearing the scapular, it's a reminder that I'm called to be a Christian. I'm called to be loyal to Jesus Christ. And so, really, what are the obligations for us as we wear the scapular? On page 6 of our handout, there are few obligations, but there are some stress points that I need to make sure are very clear. Remember that this scapular is not a magical charm to protect you. Please do not get into this idea that somehow if I wear this scapular, that it's like saying I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I can be a jerk. I can do whatever I want for the rest of my life because I never have to be kind or considerate because I know that this is the promise that was given to me. Don't fall into that. It's not a magical charm. It's a sacramental that remind us that we are calling ourselves to live in the person of Jesus Christ. It's not an automatic guarantee of salvation. Now, it sounds like a contradiction. He said, Father, well, it said as you die wearing this, you're not going to suffer eternal fires. The reality is that we wear this to remind us of who we are as Christians. We're part of a greater community. I can exclude myself from my family if I so desire to. All right, I can simply say I'm part of the family but never do anything with my family. It's the same concept. If we're part of this family, part of this religious community, it's an obligation that we have to say that I need to do the things that I'm called. What are the things that we're called to do as Christians? The spiritual and the corporal works of mercy. It's not an excuse for not living up to the demands of the Christian life. Remember, we can't simply just fall back on our responsibilities and say, I don't have to do that, I'm saved. What it is this. It is to follow Jesus like Mary. In the wedding feast of Cana, remember what Mary said to the servants? Do whatever he tells you to do. What does Christ tell us to do? He tells us to love one another as he has loved us. You think that's going to be easy? Try living as a Christian for a couple days and realize how difficult it is. But that's the responsibility that we have when we put on the scapular. Be open to God and to his will. We always ask this question, what is God's will for me? What am I supposed to do? The old Baltimore Catechism told us, the will of God is this, to know, love, and serve him in this world, and to be happy with him forever in the next. How do we know, love, and serve God? By following the spiritual and corporal works of mercy, by being faithful to the Lord in our prayer every day, that kind of thing like that. We are called to be guided by faith, hope, and love, not by fear, despair, and a divided heart. That's the opposite of faith, hope, and love. We are called to be living our lives as Christians in faith, hope, and love each and every day. We're to pray at all times. St. Paul tells us that we are to pray constantly, unceasingly. This is the obligation that we're taking on when we enroll ourselves in the scapular. And we're to discover God's presence in all that happens around us. So God is present in everything that I do, everywhere that I am. God is always present. So what is the history of the scapular? The history of the scapular was very simple. It was to bring lay Christians into the religious community, to give them the obligation that the religious brothers and sisters had, but it would give them an opportunity to also share in the spiritual benefits that they had as well, too. What are our obligations of wearing the scapular? The spiritual and corporal works of mercy are just some, but also praying and being faithful to God in everything that we do and all that we are. And finally, what are the spiritual benefits of this? We have the Mother of God, a religious community, and countless men and women praying for us each and every day as we strive to live our lives as Christians. That's it for the talk. If you're interested in enrolling in the scapular, please remain here. If you need to go, we certainly understand you do not need to stay.